Thanks for watching Inside the Studio with Greg Wurth. In this episode, I decided to take the Slate challenge. I tried to limit myself to use only Slate products from the Everything bundle. Believe it or not, it's not very hard to do, but I think it's very fun, and I figured it'd be a really cool thing to share with everybody. So again, I'm using these cool drum tracks that I got from Mike Avenaim. To start, I'll just show you what the drum tracks sound like raw, without any processing on it whatsoever, just some balancing of levels and whatnot. All right, let me go to the beginning of the track here. Let me quickly engage all my processing, and I'll show you guys what it sounds like with everything in, and then I'll go through what I got here. Cool. So that's pretty fun. I imported my Verb Suite Classic reverbs that I demonstrated in a previous video. I just pulled those in. I really dug those, so I figured why not just start out with that, something that I liked already. So let me show you what's going on with the tracks here, because there's several drum tracks. Mike used a 1965 Ludwig BDP kit and a 1960 Ludwig marching drum as a resonator, a 1970s era acrolite snare drum, and he's using Istanbul cymbals, traditional dark crash, and a Joey Waronker signature ride. So what he's got going on here for the kick drum is there's 3 microphones for that. And on the kick in here, he's using a Bayer M88. On the kick out, he's using the Mojave 301 FET mic. And on the sub kick, he's using the Yamaha sub kick. For the snare, he's using an SM77. And for the bottom, he's using an MXL V67i. For the rack toms and the floor toms, he's using 421s. For the hat, AKG 451. Overhead mic, he's using AKG 314 pairs. And for the mono tube room, he's using the AEA R84 mic. And for the stereo rooms, he's using the Cascade X15 mics. So just to give you a little history, there you go. All right. Everything is running the tape machine. I watched Slate's last video mixing tutorial, and I thought I'd try and give it a try and drink the Kool-Aid and see what's going on here. For the kick, I'm using 15 inches per second, normal bias, 16 track, and FG9. This gives a little nice low end girth here on the tracks. For the kick. For the rest of the stuff, I'm running, like the snare, I'm just running 30 IPs. I didn't need any extra low end there. For the kick in, got the trimmer here, and then I'm using this FG401 VCA compressor. I really love VCA compressors on the kick and snare. They're just really snappy, and they just have this really nice transparent vibe to it. I do wish that this had a high pass filter on it, because it's a super valuable tool to have on a compressor. All right. And then I'm using the classic FGS EQ here. So just, carving a little bit low mids, boosting some top and bottom here. For the out mic on the resonator, again, got the VTM. And then this, I'm just using the trimmer with the VCA compressor, a little bit of compression there, getting a little snap out of it. Sub kick, VTM. And then I'm using the air here to take out a lot of the top end and filter that out. And then again, I got the VCA compressor, and then I'm boosting some low end here with the earth. And I'm also using the custom lift EQ to boost some more low end on the big setting. That gives it a little fat sound there. So let's just take a listen to the kick on its own. As you can see, that definitely brought it in and gave it a really cool vibe and made it very usable. I don't feel like I need to use a sample on the kick here, which is great. Moving over to the snare. Again, got the VTM 30 inches per second using the 456 here. I'm using the FG 1176 blue stripe on the snare and the FGN Neve style EQ for the top mic. And, just classic scooping and boosting to kind of shape it. Doing a little filtering here, which is helpful. The bottom snare, VTM, and got this. I felt it was a little brittle. He's using that MXL condenser mic, so it tends to be a little brittle there, especially with the chain on the low snare mic. So I put it through a tube channel here, which is great on the virtual channel. And the rest is about the same, just boosting and cutting a little differently here on the FGN. So let's take a listen to that without anything on it. So, it helped it out a little bit. I felt for this, the snare was pretty thin. It wasn't as fat as I would hope for the tempo of the track. I thought it was tuned a little high. I felt like I needed to add a sample here. Generally, what I would do is I would, track the MIDI file and then use SSD to really lay the drum sample, which I demonstrated how I do that in a previous video. But just for this quickly, I figured it'd be cool to just pull up Trigger here just for a quick sound and get an idea so that I can later migrate this over permanently and just get all the nice articulations more properly here. I have some that sound samples here. I pulled it the Smack Beauty. It was pretty deep, so I tuned it up a couple here and brought it more in tune with this snare. Here's what it sounds like on its own. It's nice and fat. It's got a little girth. It's not too brittle. It's got some attack there, but the idea is not to really take away what's already there. So as you can see, when I add the sample, it just gives that girth, but it doesn't really take away from the tone that Mike was going for when he tracked it. And that's really what the important thing to do when you're laying samples, especially for something that's meant to sound natural. You don't want to really mess with that. So got that going on. And of course, I'm adding the 3 different verbs on the snare. I'll get to that in a second. Rack and floor toms, got the VTM, just like everything else. This one, I'm running the USA, which I think that it's meant to be an API style channel here. And I really like API on drums. And I'm using the FG 1176 blue stripe and then the FGN EQ over here. Same thing on the floor tom. All right. And on the hat, I got the tape again, VTM. I'm using the USA channel again, and I'm using the FGN EQ, and I'm doing heavy filtering, got 300 hertz here, taking away all that nasty low end out of that mic, and then just brightening it up a little bit to make it sound nice and sizzly. Here's the overheads. This sounded a little brittle. I mean, the mics were being pushed into the pre, which had a nice saturation, but I felt like some of the cymbals got a little too abrasive. So what I did was I brought in this de-esser, the E squared, to kind of tame that a little bit. And then I got the RC tube to sort of soften that up on the virtual channel, and the custom series EQ, just boosting a little low end and some top end, make it a little sparkly. And then the classic VCA compressor. I love this thing. So let's take a listen to this overhead channel without any processing on it. So let's take a listen here with all the processing in now. That's really subtle unless you have some really high quality headphones or monitors. Really tricky to hear, but I didn't want to really mess with it too much because I really like the tone, but I just wanted to take away a little bit of the abrasiveness on the cymbals. So now moving on, here's the mono room mic. Got the VTM and then the virtual mix rack here, just using a little bit of the FGN EQ. Let's take a listen to how this sounds. This sounds really funny like this, but it's really a filler. The way that he placed this mic really helped kind of glue the overall channels together. So on its own, it sounds kind of funny, but tucking it in, I felt like it just kind of thickened up the tracks and just brought everything together, sounding like a whole. All right. And here's the stereo room mics. Got the VTM here. I wanted to push a little low end off there, so I put 15 IPs. And the virtual channel here, I'm using the USA, the Monster compressor, which is basically the all-in button of the 1176, but a little more. It's got a really useful high-pass filter here, which lets that low end pass through without being compressed or triggering the compression to overdo it. Also, it's got this high frequency detector, which tames the cymbal, the really high-end cymbal sound. So it makes it a lot smoother. And it just gives that nice pumpy sound. I actually was really impressed with this room mics on its own because he's got a really nice room and his drums are tuned very well. And just the ambience of the room, he was able to use that stereo ribbon mic to capture the sound. So here's what it sounds like without any processing. Okay, not bad. I mean, I didn't really have to do anything with it, but I just figured I'd try and mess around. So here I'm going to add the processing now. As you can hear, it makes that snare super explosive and it extends the decay of it, which is great. I brought the mix down here to 60%. So it's just kind of, I tried to keep a nice blend in there so it didn't really take away the vibe of what the room sounded like because I really like that room. Let's take a listen to how everything sounds. And then after that, I'll bring in these cool reverbs again. So let's take a listen. Let me start it from the top. So it's really nice. I don't have bass, vocals, guitar, or anything, so there's nothing to really compare it in context. So I was just really trying to get a really cool drum sound just as is, standalone. And I'm really happy with that. These plugins are they're killer. You can do a whole mix without using any plugins except for these. Let me go ahead and show you these verbs one more time. So I got the FG480 preset that I chose, and I got it on the snare, a little bit on the toms. So let's take a listen. So I got it blended in there, a good amount, but not too much to make it overpower. Again, I don't like unnatural sounding verbs on drums. I'm just one of those guys. So moving on, let's add this one, which is the non-lin, the classic 80s cheesy stuff. But if you use it correctly, it just really makes the track sound fat. And for this, I'm adding in a little bit here on the snare, and then I'm actually adding a tiny bit on the kick. So it's extending those hits to make it sound a little fatter. All right, let's take a listen. as you heard when I brought it up, you can kind of hear what it sounds like, and then you just bring it down to taste. And lastly, here's this other verb, which is the FG6000, just a really cool room reverb that I got. So let's take a listen to that. I'm just adding it on the snare. Three really cool verbs, 3 of 8 reverbs that come in this bundle here. Lastly is on the master, I got a virtual mix bus here, and I got it on the USA. I'm using the custom series lift EQ to add a little low end here, and the revival plugin to add a little top end sparkle here. They're calling it shimmer, and it sounds really nice. Let me bypass this whole channel strip, and you can hear it without, and then I'll engage it. So there you have it. Here's a really cool drum sound using nothing but Slate plugins from the Everything bundle. Thanks for watching Inside the Studio with Greg Wurth, and I'll check you out next time.